system size by predicting the total energy of a system as a sum of local energies. These objects are functions of local atomic environments rho. And what this is it's an object that encodes information about relative positions of atoms, species, charges, whatever, of atoms surrounding a central element atom I up to a cutoff radius R. So you carve a sphere around your atom and you only consider atoms within that sphere. Then this object is usually a scalar field, a 3D scalar field, that then you will have to transform into a usually finite size descriptor, or whether it is learned or chosen a priori. So this is the very quick setup of what machine learning potentials are. But as we all know, a fundamental feature, bug of machine learning algorithms is that they only are accurate on data they kind of know. So on the plot on the left is a very toy example where we try to learn a Lennard-Jones potential with a Gaussian process regression. And you can see very clearly what happens. You're very accurate where you have data, but once you start having no data, the model does what it wants, basically. And unfortunately for us, doing molecular dynamics, atoms most likely will end up in regions of the phase space you've never seen before. So it is essential in machine learning potentials to monitor the predicted accuracy of the force field itself in order to have accurate and trustable simulations. So in this work we did a year ago now, almost, we explored the robust extrapolation of high-dimensional machine learning potentials and asked ourselves our question. The question is, are the potentials accurate only because they interpolate? What does it mean to interpolate? What does it mean to extrapolate? And what can we say about this? So we started from the most commonly accepted definition of interpolation and extrapolation, which is the convex hull geometric definition. And we looked at three different descriptors, which are very widely used in this scientific literature: ACE, its cousin SOAP, and the Beller-Parinello symmetry functions. And all these descriptors are highly dimensional, and depending on the number of species and such, you can come from 100 to several thousands of features. And finally, we looked at three different test training data sets, all gathered from physically relevant phases. So just a recap, if you are not familiar with the term, a convex hull mathematically is a set of points, or a set of points, is the smallest convex set that contains such points. So in the figure, you see the convex hull is the blue line, and it splits the space into two regions, the interpolation region, green, and the extrapolation region, red. And there is this common assumption that when your machine learning algorithm is in the interpolation, all good, your test accuracy is fine. When you're outside of it, well, you have bad test accuracy. So this is the setup of the convex hull. As for the local atomic environment descriptors, as I said, we looked at three of them. The first one is the earliest one, which is the Beller-Parinello functions, basically, which are 2 and 3 body descriptors based on basically histograms of distances and angles. Then we look at 2 other ones based on local density encodings, the SOAP and the ACE, which are quite correlated. And they both basically approximate the atomic density via spherical harmonics expansions, and then they do products, rotational invariant products of these expansions to get n+1 body descriptors from it. So these are 3 different sets we look at. For the data sets, we took some from literature, in particular the Montserrat et al. Water ice data set, which is a class of, this is a heterogeneous data set because the training set is fundamentally different from the test set. Training data is, well, you can debate on this, but training data is water structures, test set is ice phases. Another one is the polar opposite, let's say. It's the Zhu et al. Data set where you have 6 pairs of training test sets, and these are perfect and deformed crystals randomly split. So in theory, this should be an homogeneous data set. And finally, we looked at the custom-made gold-13 nanoparticle data set, where we have 5 sets of MD simulations at different temperatures for this tiny nanoparticle. So, well, this is mostly the first part of the observation is that machine learning potentials always extrapolate. There's no way around it. When you compute the convex hull on the full descriptor, all of the points in the test set are inevitably outside of the convex hull defined by the training set. This happens always, no matter what, no matter where. Well, this is true, but also kind of trivial when you go to such high dimensions. It's just a geometrical feature. What's more interesting, perhaps, is that if you do PCA compression on the descriptors, you have to compress quite a lot before points starts being in the interpolation regime. You see, for the 3 data sets, this number can be 25, 15, or even 10. This means that actually what happens is that, well, even in lower dimensional regimes where it's not geometrically guaranteed that all points are outside the convex hull, they will still be outside the convex hull. Another observation you see from these plots, by the way, the plots are on the x-axis, we have the number of features we compress with PCA for the descriptors, and on the y, we have the percentage or the fraction of points of the test set that are inside the convex hull of the training set. So another thing you can observe from these points is that PCA projection with low P's, and most importantly PCA with number 2, which is all of our plots which look pretty basically, mistakenly report all validation points to be inside the convex hull. Well, this basically means don't use PCA to assess whether you are interpolation, extrapolation, it just is wrong. Finally, in MD simulations, which we remember is the last data set, the bottom one, the gold, where we specifically said that here test set is every environment, while the training set is every other environment. So this is basically saying, based on everything else, what is this? Basically, we see that in MD, everything goes outside of the convex hull immediately and almost always. One might argue, well, true, but we don't really need 1,000 features. Well, yeah, you have a point. So the hard question we would like to answer here is, what is the low-dimensional manifold that this data lives in, or the potentials are working in? This is a super hard question. There is a field of machine learning dedicated to answering these kind of questions, and we're not probably equipped yet to answer it. A simple question we can answer is, can we still obtain good prediction accuracy using a fraction of the feature dimensions? And there are some works in, quite a lot of works now in this direction. Here I'm just showing 2 from something we did. You see on the left plot, for example, we have the force error as a function of the number of components of a compressed SOAP descriptor, where the compression is done both randomly and with the information imbalance algorithm we developed within the DadaPy package. And on the right, it's a simpler approach, let's say, where we just do PCA on ACE descriptors. And we see that we can get good accuracy with only 60, 70 features instead of the full 200, 300. Well, point is that despite these, despite all our best efforts, we still need 20-ish, 30, 40, 50 features. So it just means that we are helpless. We will always be in extrapolation, and we just should accept this. Or we just say that, well, this is just not a good way to express extrapolation and the concept of it. And so to overcome this issue, we introduced the concept of sampling density. We named it maybe. So the sampling density is basically we take the training set, we fit a density to it in a way that I'll explain in a second. And then for each training point, we just say, well, what's the density of the test set here? Is it high, is it low? If it's high, probably we're good. If it's low, we're probably bad. So we do this via adaptive k-nearest neighbors with some twists, in the sense that usually k-nearest neighbors in high dimension is just terrible because you have too many dimensions. Here we choose adaptively the k at each point following an algorithm developed by Rodriguez, Rico, and Laio a few years ago. And also we estimate the local dimensionality of the manifold via a nearest neighbor-based approach so that we scale with the dimensionality of the manifold, and we can have a better interpolation and estimation of the density of the data at each point. But does this work? Well, yes, it kind of works. So you can see in the plot here, in the x-axis, the negative log sampling density. So to put it simply, points on the left are very well sampled by the training set, points on the right are not. And on the y, the test mean absolute error incurred by a ridge regression potentials using the ACE descriptor. And the points are basically being the sampling density. And you see there is quite a strong correlation between the test and then log sampling density, indicating that this can indeed be used as a proxy for force error estimation. This is just the same plot, but we have split the 7 data sets to actually show the complete scatter plot, the scatter density. Of course, this is not the end all be all. There are infinite measures of well sampleness, the minimum distance from training set, which is unfortunately very sensitive to outliers, standard deviation of ensemble of models, which is quite general and accounts for target variables, which is quite important, but requires multiple models, computationally expensive, kernel density estimation, but that doesn't work in high dimensions, or the optimal methods, but there are many, many, many more. I'm not saying this is the only way to do this. Quantification papers that many of these amazing force fields that get the bold numbers then fail completely and catastrophically during MD simulations. Thanks. And this is actually a problem for us. Another thing we would like to see is to analyze learned representation spaces and see if, for example, hidden layers in graph neural networks behave the same way as pre-built descriptors. And finally, we would like to employ this for dataset selection active learning loops because it's quite well suited for the purpose. The last 2 minutes that I have, I would briefly talk about my new job at Microsoft, and in particular, the AI for Science initiative we launched. So this is an initiative that started last summer, and basically, Microsoft Research has invested some amount of money in developing a team of machine learning and physical science experts to tackle challenges in the field. We have, at the moment, 5 labs, one in Shanghai and Beijing, Cambridge, Amsterdam, Berlin, and Redmond. And we basically believe in the project that we are at a unique convergence of fundamental science, heavy-duty computational modeling, machine learning advancements, such that we can really solve outstanding issues in natural sciences, in condensed matter, computational chemistry, molecular biology, and do so with the tools of machine learning. So if you're interested in joining the fine folks you see here, my colleagues at the Cambridge, Amsterdam, Berlin, and then many more others in Beijing and Redmond, and then feel free to, actually, you're very welcome to look at the career space of the Microsoft Research website, Microsoft Research Careers. These are 4 positions we have open at the moment, and periodically we also open internship positions for PhD students and master students, and well, you keep up updated. Finally, I would like to thank my collaborators on this project from CISA, Kevin Rossi, not from CISA, but from the CISA times, Kevin Rossi, Stefano De Gironcoli, Andrea Anelli, and Aldo Gelmo, CISA and Max for funding, and Microsoft Research for current funding. Thank you very much.
Other questions?
Hello. Yes. Okay. Thanks for the great talk. And these are the kind of questions that I've also been thinking about. So maybe a question along the lines of what you said were your future directions. So when you say that you would like to compile a data set which can help benchmark uncertainty. So uncertainty kind of depends upon kind of, let's say, if you're trying, if we take a simple prediction task, if let's say whatever it means to be outside the data regime, if you're outside the data regime, then the uncertainty is high, inside is low. But then it also depends on what you're predicting, right? So the same data set, if the prediction target changes, then it changes completely. So this would probably be like a bunch of benchmarks rather than one benchmark. So yeah. What are your thoughts around that? Because then I think it's kind of we need a benchmark, but it's also very dependent on the problem that we're trying to solve.
No, definitely, I agree with you. The benchmark does not have to be one single file. We could look at uncertainty in my field, I always think about force field tasks, so energy, forces, and stress. But of course, it could be scalar properties, vector properties, and definitely looking at something beyond just the traditional energy forces is definitely needed. And I agree with you that we need more than one task and possibly more than one data set and more than one field. We can't only have crystals. We have to have crystals. We have to be amorphous liquids, even biomolecules. The point is we need a set of tasks which are universally recognized as hard and complex, and that everybody's to a certain extent can agree upon the fact that they are worth studying and worth benchmarking. And it's worth having the bold numbers on those because that actually means that you can run simulations. Thanks for the observation, definitely.
Hello, thank you for the good talk. You gave an example with Gaussian process for a Lennard-Jones potential.
Mm-hmm.
You mind going to that screen? Because you commented that the Gaussian process would do anything between those training sets. So for example, shouldn't the blue line be like an average of the?
Depends on the hyperparameters. So if your length scale is smaller, because in your training data you have seen that that's the optimal length scale. It just happens that this is a randomly drawn sample from that particular set of Gaussians.
That's my point. Is the blue line a randomly drawn sample, or is it the mean of all the samples?
That's a mean. That's a mean prediction with the variance as blue regions.
Okay. Yeah, I find it very hard to understand why it would have a higher area on top than below the curve.
Sorry?
I would think there should be an equal amount of area on top of the curve and below the curve.
There is maybe on average, if you sample infinite times, if you train infinite times with some noise, then that is true. But this is a single time, a single instance of a trained Gaussian process.
Okay, so then we have a question in Zoom from Pierre-Paul de Broek, and it is that nearest neighbor is indeed correlated to uncertainty prediction. Neglecting computation issues, is one better than the other?
You mean nearest neighbors in the data set, I assume?
Maybe I just talk this whole comment. Yes.
Well, assuming
Yes.
it is, okay, it is. Well, nearest neighbors is quite fast if you build a tree in computing, but it's still very, as I said, it's very sensitive to outliers. If you have a single point kind of nearby, your uncertainty estimation via number of, well, if you need number of nearest neighbors, then that starts becoming basically a density estimation, a KDE density if you use a Gaussian kernel. So if you use single point, you're very dependent on outliers. And if you use KDA, that actually scales quite badly in high dimensions if you don't do the proper corrections, I think. I don't know if this answers the question. Okay, good.
Okay, let's thank Claudio again.